numbers. So to start off with, these are the crucial rules that you need to know. If we look at the first one, what you have is you look at two positives. So for instance, if we have positive 2 times by positive 2, you should all know that that equals 4. So ultimately what you have there is you have a positive number times by another positive number will end up giving you a positive number. The same can be said when we have two positives and we're dividing. So if we were to do 2 divided by 2, and we know that that equals 1. So what you have there is you have a positive divided by a positive equals a positive number. So those two rules there, those two examples, go with that first one. Now, looking at the second rule now, positive and a negative. So if I was to have a positive 2 and I timesed it by a negative 2, that would give me an answer of negative 4. So what you have there is you have a positive, then you are timesing your positive by a negative number, so you've got a positive times by a negative, and that equals a negative. The same rule applies when we're doing division, so 2 divided by negative 2 equals negative 1. So what you have there is you have a positive, you are then dividing that positive number by a negative number to get an answer of a negative. So what you have there is you have a positive and a negative equals a negative, and a positive divided by a negative equals a negative as well. So that there is the second rule. We now have the third rule to look at. So the third rule states that a negative times by a positive is a negative, so it's basically the same as the second one, except the other way around. So if you were to have this time negative 2 times by 2, that would equal negative 4, and negative 2 divided by 2 would then end up equaling negative 1. So what we have there is we have a negative number times by a positive number, and the answer to that is a negative in the multiplication. And then in the division, you have a negative number divided by a positive number this time, and then that ends up equaling a negative. So that is the third rule. And then that brings us on to the very final rule when we're multiplying and dividing by negative numbers that you need to know, and that is that a negative and a negative will always make a positive. So if we were to have negative 2 times by negative 2, that will equal a 4, and then negative 2 divided by negative 2 will also end up equaling a positive 4. So we have there a negative times by a negative equals a positive, and a negative divided by a negative equals a positive, and that is your fourth and final rule. And that concludes multiplying and dividing by negative numbers.